everyone, and welcome back to Nintendo Everything Refresh, the weekly show where we keep you up to date as to everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo. This is episode 26, and I am joined by Dennis Gagliardato.
Hello, hello.
And we've got Nicolas today.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
I know we've kind of had a rotating cast recently. I know it's been a while since we've had all four of us, but don't worry, Louise is still around. He's still trucking along, and we're hopefully we'll have one with all four of us sometime soon. I won't be here next week, just throwing it out there for all of our listeners, but we are still gonna keep doing these weekly episodes for you guys. So thank you to everyone who has been coming back week after week. All right, so a little bit of a slower news week, which, I mean, gosh, thank goodness, because I don't know if y'all listened to our episode last week, but there was so much to talk about. It was ridiculous.
That was meaty. Yeah, that was big. That was really big.
Between the Nintendo Direct and Tokyo Game Show, that was probably a bigger week for gaming news than E3 and Summer Games Fest and all that. Which is crazy.
Yeah, I would say so. It was a lot.
Yeah, fortunately this week, a little bit easier to digest, but we still got some exciting stuff to talk about. First and foremost, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to get hands-on with Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and how the game felt to play, and just kind of do a little roundtable discussion, get a sense for what there is to look forward to in this next big Mario game that is coming up pretty quick. We're going to talk a little bit about Detective Pikachu 2. There were some rumors that game is actually pretty close to release. Then we just got some other smaller topics towards the back end of the show. I won't spoil everything out the gate, but let's get right into the most exciting topic, in my opinion. Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. This is the big sequel to 2017's Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which was a real, I think, surprise for a lot of us. I mean, I think a lot of, this was right when the Switch came out. It was really the first big Mario game on it, so a lot of people were going to pick it up. But it was kind of a divisive concept, oh, you guys are going to put the Rabbids of all things in my Mario game? That's just weird. But I think folks who actually played it, I really enjoyed it. It ended up being one of my favorite, Mario games, maybe up there with some of the best of them for me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's, who would have thought Mario XCOM and you just kind of shove Rabbids in there and it turned out great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, that concept, you're absolutely right with that concept of having both the Rabbids and Mario, especially since Rabbids themselves are very, they're kind of like the minions, right? I mean, you kind of either love them or hate them, because they can be a little over the top. But yeah, no, it all meshed really, really well, and it really became a labor of love that I think just absolutely was seen on just about every single frame of that game.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell that it was just made by a passionate group of people. Yes, Ubisoft hasn't had the best history over the last couple of years, but with the right team of people and the right project, I mean, it's clear that they still have developers there that are very much not only passionate but excited about the projects that they're working on. And David Soliani, who was I believe the creative director of the first game, and I believe still is for the second game. I'm not 100% sure on that. He was just so, I mean, number one, what a great guy, but number two, it's clear that it was a dream come true for him, because I mean, I'm sure we all remember the Ubisoft presentation from years ago where Miyamoto was on stage and he was presenting it, and they pan to him and he's crying in the crowd. He's just so overwhelmed with joy and emotion, and he can't believe that Miyamoto is there talking about him, talking about his game, because he looked up to him. So it was very clearly a label of love. It was a very heartfelt moment, and that showed through just how good Mario Rabbids was, and I do believe Sparks of Hope will be just as good, if not better. So,
yeah, I was. So I got to play this game for almost 4 hours, and in that kind of preview session, I got to play through the prologue, which I can't really talk too much about, just for spoiler reasons. But I also got to most of the demo was exploring these kind of two big in-game planets. So the first one is called Beacon Beach. It's kind of like this like stormy island planet. It's the first one you visit right after the prologue, and then there's another one later in the game called Pristine Peaks, which is like your typical kind of snow ice themed world. But yeah, I mean, pretty much from the moment I started playing, you could tell just how substantial of an improvement this is over the first game, just in so many areas. I mean, from the attention to detail, just everything is just so just like lovingly crafted. The animations are just splendid. Like even not just talking about like the main cast of characters, but just like environmental details and NPCs, just everything is animated so well. That was really, I think, the first thing that caught my eye. But I kind of want to throw it to you guys. Like, what are you guys curious about? Looking at this game that's coming out in a little over a month, what are you guys curious to know about?
I'm curious what motivated the decision to have Rabbids speak in like full English sentences, but then still have the Mario cast just go waha.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know why, but let me tell you, it's that was one of my favorite things. Like it. I will say, like, for people who probably don't like the Rabbids, I don't know if this is going to help you, but it kind of works. It's weird. So like you'll be in combat and Rabid Peach, you'll trigger, for example, you'll trigger her like group healing thing, and then she'll just blurt out like, "This is our healing journey" or something like that. And you're just like, "Oh, okay." Like it's like it like catches you off guard so much that it's just hilarious.
Yeah,
I think it's because it was so random that it was just like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, it's the contrast of having the Rabbids, which are the characters you least expect to speak, actually be able to talk normally. That really makes it great.
Yeah. It's like I feel bad because I can't recall like every single line of dialogue that they said, but like I feel like everything they did say, like the comedic timing was perfect. And their voice actors just are going like clearly like to 150%. And so it makes just even these really simple lines of dialogue just sound just really funny and adds a lot of charm to the game. But yeah, when I was playing, I was talking with some of the other people who were playing the demo, and we were all like, did this happen in the first game? Did they talk? And we like couldn't remember at first because it felt so natural the way that they had worked it into the combat mostly.
So, this is just a curious question, really. But I know Rabid Rosalina is in the game, but I don't know if this is something you can mention or if they're just saving this as like a surprise. But like, is regular Rosalina, like Princess Rosalina, is she there at all, or just the Rabid version of her? Seems weird to have the Rabid version, but not the real Rosalina. I haven't seen her at all.
Yeah. So I didn't get to play as Rabid Rosalina. I should say that.
Okay.
There was a new character that they introduced called Edge that I did get to play out, which I do want to talk about that character because it's kind of cool. But yeah. So there are some implications that Rosalina might be in the game, like later on. I really don't want to spoil it too much because I haven't played through the full game, so I can't say for sure. Yep. But yeah, it does sound like I am getting kind of the sense that there are going to be some deeper connections to maybe the Mario Galaxy games. I don't know how deep it's going to go, but there was a moment in the prologue that kind of implied that we're going to be seeing some interesting things down the road.
Mm-hmm. I think in the Pristine Peaks gameplay that we posted earlier, there's a section near the end where they mentioned trying to find Rosalina. For what it's worth?
Yes.
So she probably is a character that exists, just, probably making appearance more in the late game, I would assume.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much the extent of what I know about Rosalina being in the game or not. But honestly, just that alone has me intrigued. You know, this might be the closest thing we ever get to a Super Mario Galaxy 3. Even though it doesn't really share any of those mechanics. It's, if it ties in, I'm there for it.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the theming of this is so heavily galaxy based. It's it's a good direction, but it's so funny after years of, Galaxy basically being not exactly left behind, but we've moved on from Galaxy to other things, and now suddenly this is like Rosalina and galaxies traveling between planets, basically Lumas in the form of sparks. I think even starbits and stuff. Like, it's a lot. It's funny.
Yeah. It does feel kind of out of left field, but it really works for this type of game. I mean, I don't really know exactly how many planets are in the game at this point, but it seems like you'll be hopping around fairly frequently, and there's a lot of just environmental diversity in this game, and so it does kind of lend itself well to the idea of, we're traveling through the universe, going to different planets and all that. It fits really well. And yeah, the weird like rabid Luma hybrids. So those are the actual like sparks in the game's title, the Sparks of Hope or whatever. They're like these rabid Luma hybrids, and they act as I don't want to say like companions, but you can equip at the start of the game. You can equip like one of them to each of your characters, and it gives them basically like an elemental attack, for example. So you can say, oh, okay, this enemy is weak to fire, so I can equip my fire, spark, and that will help me in combat. And then later in the game, you can equip two of them, and you obtain more of them just as you kind of progress through the game and complete different objectives. But you can also like upgrade them. Like, they all have their own kind of like upgrade path, and that's on top of like the upgrade paths for just your normal cast of characters like Mario and Peach and all that. So there's going to be quite a bit of, I mean, I definitely got the impression that there's a lot of depth to like how you want to build out your party and how you want to approach these tactical challenges. Definitely more than I had the chance to like dig into during my preview session, which is a good thing in my mind. Like, there's more depth than I was able to fully, dig into.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear. I think they've said that there's been a few other things they've done as well that I think kind of help evolve the game from the first entry. Like, in the first game, you always need to have a Rabbids character and a Mario character in your party at all times, and I think you also always need to have Mario in your party. And if I recall correctly, they've changed that in this. Just giving your
well, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure about if Mario has to be in your party, because I think I just always had him in mind. But yeah, I definitely, I didn't always have a rabbit in my party, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. There was one battle I just did just with Mario and Luigi.
Yeah, and just like that matter of kind of opening up what you can do gameplay-wise, that's nice, because that was a small complaint I had about the original, where it did kind of restrict just the way you had to form your party in that regard. But I think just in general, everything we've seen of the game, both exploration and combat-wise, just looks so good. It really does seem like an evolution of the previous one. I did not realize the Sparks had their own upgrade paths, so that's kind of exciting to hear. That's an extra layer of depth I was not aware of. But even outside of that...
Yeah, it's like you feed them basically like the star bits that you collect. So it's another little galaxy connection.
That makes sense.
There.
Yeah. I mean, like, even outside of that, which is another layer of complexity, everything in combat is totally overhauled in terms of things being more semi-real time. Not exactly real time, but it is so much more real time than the previous game. It feels almost unfair to be able to watch people able to do all of these things before enemies even get a turn to move.
Yeah, I felt kind of bad about it, as I was like, oh my gosh, like, these enemies, like, they don't even have a chance sometimes. Like, there was one battle where I mean, if it's I wouldn't say it's just like an easy thing to do all the time, but like, it's totally possible. Like, if you are leveraging all of your character's moves that they can do before you even attack, you can sometimes clear out an entire battlefield before the enemies have even had a chance. Like, because you have, you still have like your dash attack, for example, so you can like basically slide into enemies and you can deal damage that way. But later on in the game, like one of the characters, Edge, he's like this Actually, I think it's a girl, but Edge is like this kind of like mysterious, like ninja-ish rabbit. I don't really know how to describe it. But Edge has like a equipable skill that lets the character do like 3 dash attacks. So you could, if you have that character in your party, you can damage one enemy 3 times, or potentially like a row of enemies like 3 times, which is crazy. And then you still have like your team jump, right? So you can launch your characters all over the map. You can, so it's ridiculous how much you can do before you even enter like a traditional combat phase.
Yeah, even just the fact you can throw bombs at enemies was just such a, how is this fair? Like, you can freely run into a bomb, pick it up, and toss it in like any direction, all during your turn without them being able to do anything. And the bomb looked like it did massive damage.
Yeah.
It feels like there's this like god complex that they're trying to like put on the player, basically. Where it's just like, look, the world is at your disposal, man. Just go in and just destroy everything. But I wonder if that's not only a way to be strategic because you're adding so many layers, right, and taking advantage of this overall combat system that can just add, techniques on top of techniques to really maximize, the damage output. But I also wonder if it's a way to also have increased, accessibility without explicitly putting it through a sort of difficulty wall, if that makes sense. Where people could just sort of, experiment, even if they're not familiar with this type of genre. They can sort of, play around and still have a favorable outcome to the battle.
Yeah, there are different difficulty options you get to choose from at the beginning of the game. So I do, it is like inclusive in that way. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Like for the folks who really want to dive in deep and, learn all the mechanics, yeah, you can really, you can accomplish a lot more the more you dig into it. So it is rewarding in that way. But I will say that like, the battles do get tricky. Like, and maybe this is just because like the second half of the demo that we played was much later in the game, so they kind of had to just quickly run us through, oh, here's this new mechanic that, normally you would have unlocked earlier in the game, but we're just going to tell you about it now. But like, there are some like pretty challenging like stages that I ran into in the demo. Like one of them, for example, and they have different objectives. So not all the stages are centered around just like clearing out all the enemies. One of them was, okay, you need to, so like there were all these like, I can probably describe them best as like these like giant pipes that like when you hit a switch, it would blow out a gust of air and it would push anything in its way like down to the next level, right? So your goal was to like basically get one of the bob-ombs from the top level all the way down to the bottom level to like blow up this, they call it in the game, they call it dark mess instead of darkness, like darkness. So your goal was to like hit these switches and get the bob-omb all the way from the top all the way down to the bottom. But at the same time, like you're being like attacked by enemies from all different angles, and some of them are really tough. And one of the game's developers was actually watching me like struggle through the section, and he was like, he came over to me, he was like, I just want to make sure you understand what you're supposed to be doing. He was like, you don't have to fight all these guys. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I have no choice. They're surrounding me. It's also, just a side note, a little intimidating, like playing through someone else's video game while they're sitting there watching you. Like the guy watching me, he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm like the level designer for this game," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, great. So you're gonna
you're doing it wrong."
Yeah, like for anyone who's, whether you're a member of the press or you just got lucky at like an event or something like that, if you've been in that situation, it is very like intimidating, because like that first time it happened to me was years and years ago, before the original Division came out. I went to a convention, and the team, I believe at Red Storm Studios, was there showing off the Division, on the topic of Ubisoft. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I thought these were just people that were just sort of representing the game. It was just like here's an early look at it. No, like like the UI designer is there, right? The creative director is
Right.
there, and like all these guys that are part of the team. Everyone there had a role on at the studio, and I was like, oh, okay, and they're all like breathing down my shoulder, just making sure everything's good to go. And this was a very early build of the game. Like this was a whole entire year before the game came out, so very early build.
Right.
But yeah, it's intimidating. It can be very intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, no. So the level design like was just really impressed me, and especially in the exploration phase too. Like the worlds are not massive from what I gather, but there's a lot of different like layers to them. So like you might be out in the overworld, for example, and then you'll go into a building, and it's just this just massive structure with all these different rooms and stuff. So I think that people are going to be surprised at how big this game is and how much there is to see and do.
That's really exciting though. Like that's I think, you know, having a sequel that genuinely feels like a sequel. Because I don't know about you guys. I feel like there's just been this trend lately with games. Now this isn't the case with everything, but I don't know. Sequels like used to mean. I don't want to say they used to mean something because there's still
Sounds like you do,
excitement. Yeah, well, I mean, there's still an excitement when there's a follow up. Well, yeah, I know I sound like an old guy. Just like you can just clip any clip from Clint Eastwood from Gran Torino. Just me being an old grumpy man on a porch. But it's sequels still have a level of excitement to them, absolutely. But sequels maybe because now we have the ability to patch stuff and update, and there's DLC and things like that. But sequels just don't have that same sort of like impact and that substantial change and feeling that they used to. You used to go in and like you were familiar with the concept and the brand that you were getting into, but you weren't, but the game still felt new. It still felt different. It was this level of excitement that was like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is a fantastic sequel. But now it's like I think games are almost getting too comfortable with how they are, and since it just came out, it's a perfect example. But it's we're starting to see that over the last couple of years, and it's not the first one to do this, but this sort of Splatoon effect, where it's just like, all right, just kind of do the same thing as before because we don't want to scare off players, right? We have a foundation of followers that we want to retain, for the next release. But we also want to sort of innovate, but slightly. But yeah, nothing feels substantial, but this feels substantial, right? It's just like let's do that, but like make it so much better, right? Let's tweak anything and everything that we know we can improve on to really make it feel like, yes, this is Mario Rabbids, but, man, what a brand new experience. Like, it still has its own identity. It doesn't feel like more of the same. Instead, it feels like, we're going to really celebrate. It feels like a celebration. That's what it feels like, where it's just like, we're passionate, man. Let's just go balls to the wall and, make this game as great as we can as we can make it. Even though we already did that for the first one, let's really try to challenge ourselves and top that, And I think that ability to top, a predecessor now is sort of put to the side in favor of, let's just make sure we have a game that sells, really, And that familiarity is, I think, what drives. It's a safety net, making sure things are familiar. So people are like, oh yeah, no, I love the first one. I'll just pick up that, because that looks cool, But I don't know. I just want. I think it's what makes every new Pokemon generation exciting. Yes, it's still Pokemon, but like you're in a new region, right? You have brand new Pokemon. It's yes, there's gimmicks that can or cannot be annoying, but yeah.
I don't know. I necessarily agree with that take on Pokemon specifically, but
well, yeah, because I mean,
Dennis, if that's how you feel, Dennis, I think you will be impressed with this game. I think you will be impressed with the scope of it for sure.
Okay. Well, it looks exciting. I'm super stoked.
Yeah, and it's right around the corner too, October 20th, and we will have a review coming out right around that time, hopefully. So So yeah, stay tuned for that. But hey, speaking of sequels, here's a sequel that I guess we've technically known has existed for a long time, but we don't know anything about it, which is really weird. So this has been just a weird one. So Detective Pikachu, do y'all remember this game on the 3DS? It came out, I want to say, towards the end of the 3DS's lifespan, and it was it was a short, kind of narrative-centric, Pokemon spinoff. Well, back in 2019, they announced a bunch of new Pokemon games, including a new Detective Pikachu game for Switch, but we've heard absolutely nothing about it since then. And then all of a sudden, this week, it was spotted on LinkedIn that someone who works on the game, someone's basically their profile specifically mentioned Detective Pikachu 2 and said it was nearing release. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's so weird, right? It's always bizarre when you have these games that have been announced years and years ago or mentioned years and years ago, and then they just, you get radio silence, and then suddenly you get a little peep here and there, oh, hey, this still exists. It's
like Pikmin 4, for
yes.
example.
Well, yeah. I feel like it was more than a peep for Pikmin 4, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, absolutely. And this is just, again, this is what this is. This is a senior programmer at Creatures Inc. And just, hey, the game is nearing release, despite the fact we've heard literally nothing about it in 3 years.
Yeah. So I guess this kind of brings up the main question I want to ask is, what do you guys want to see in a Detective Pikachu 2? Because we got the Detective Pikachu movie, which was just very different compared to the game, totally different setting, totally different vibe, I would say.
Yeah.
But it was interesting in its own way. I would be interested to see okay, maybe they should just lean harder into this sci-fi noir detective story. I'd be there for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally for it. I mean, I don't know if you guys played Detective Pikachu, but I loved that game. I thought it was great. It was such a cool, unique take on a Pokemon spin-off, and I don't know, I find myself enjoying the spin-offs a lot more than the main games, just for some reason. And Detective Pikachu was just such a cool sort of perspective on, let's take that Pokemon universe, but really, make it, this sort of, let's just go for a 1940s sort of vibe and put it in the modern day, but it was such a cool concept, and there was really nothing like it. But yeah, to say what I want from Detective Pikachu 2, I'm not sure, right? Because it's Detective Pikachu, looking back on it, didn't really have much in terms of gameplay.
It didn't light the world on fire. Yeah.
yeah. It just kind of went around and investigated things, but the cutscenes were really well done, all things considered, for a 3DS game. And the graphics look good, and yeah, I mean, I honestly, I wouldn't complain if we end up getting more of the same, and it's Pokemon, so you probably will, but it's, yeah, I don't know, either way, I'm excited, and the moment it got announced, I was give it to me. And dude, I've been thinking about this on a weekly basis basically since then, so now that we've gotten this
really?
News piece,
weekly
I'm not even
basis.
joking. Yeah, weekly basis, yeah, no, it's an issue. I do see it.
I wake up at night and see a Pikachu with a detective hat out my window.
Games that live rent-free in Dennis's head. Detective Pikachu 2.
Yeah, and I did rewatch the movie for the 12th time the other day. So, I really like the movie too, but yeah, no, it's hard to say. It's hard to say because that game was so unique that it's I don't know what they could or couldn't do for a game like that. But I guess the only thing I can really ask for is, rather than the side-scrolling nature of it that it was before, I would like more of an over-the-shoulder sort of view. Like AI Somnium Files or something like that.
Okay, a more traditional third-person adventure, you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it kind of, I didn't play the first one. I think I was a little caught off guard by just gruff Pikachu's voice, but
yeah.
But it kind of played kind of like a point-and-click game, right? You're kind of like a no.
Well, no, I mean you're not too far off, but like, yeah, I mean, you could still control the character, but I mean, effectively gameplay wise, that is what it was, right? Where you would sort of walk to a place, select a place, select an object, and then just sort of investigate it. So no, you're not wrong in terms of like by
Okay.
definition of what a point and click essentially is, but you did have more sort of control, and three-dimensional movement for the character. But yeah, everything was sort of done like scene by scene in a sort of side-scrolling manner, and I mean, you had like a Z-axis, but yeah, I do want
Right,
more of like an
right.
over-the-shoulder um, uh, shot and something that gives more. I want more collectibles too. I feel like that was the big problem with the first one. It was very linear, and once you finished it, you finished it. There wasn't really anything in terms of post game, and especially the way that it left off on a cliffhanger. Um, it was sort of disappointing in that regard. So I would like more collectibles, more of a post game as well, and just something to really flesh out the entire experience a little bit more instead of, this A to B to C, all the way to Z sort of format. Because it just made it um, too linear for my liking. But yeah, that was my only real critique of that game. Otherwise, I loved it. I thought Detective Pikachu was great.
Yeah, it seems. I think the thing that intrigues me most about it, other than just how off the wall it is as like a Pokemon spin-off, is it seems like the main reason why this game existed was because they wanted to make they wanted to give you like a very what's the word I'm looking for? They wanted to like take like a Pokemon location and make it feel like a real place. Like they wanted to give you like a deeper look into like what these Pokemon cities would look like and let you explore them a little bit. And that is interesting to me. And so yeah, like to see what a modern implementation of that would look like, especially Dennis, like if what you were suggesting, like, oh, if we did get something that plays out like a more traditional third person adventure, there's a lot of potential for like detective style gameplay in like this fully explorable city. Like that would be really cool.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the production value was through the roof in that game too. So I actually didn't know that what you had just had mentioned about, the making them wanting to feel like a lifelike city. I think they nailed it. I think they did a really really great job with that. So and they can take advantage of the Switch hardware,
Yeah.
and take that to the next step. I mean, oh God, I mean, just thinking about it is like that's that's super exciting to me, and I think a big step in the right direction for where that series can potentially go for sure.
What about you, Nicholas? I know you're a big Pokemon fan. Are you down for Detective Pikachu too?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in it. I do own the first game, but I never ended up playing it. I think at some point in time, I got it just, for the novelty of it.
Yeah.
At some point, I heard that just as a game, it's not bad or anything, but it's very much kind of like baby's first, like, Ace Attorney, if that makes sense. I'm sure that's probably a bit of an
Yeah.
exaggeration, but which kind of just made me a little less interested. Watching a little bit of gameplay, the more investigative parts of the game seemed like they were, toned down to the point that anyone can enjoy them, essentially. So that kind of lowered my interest for it a little. But I still think it's a good concept. I did watch the movie, and like Dennis, I also really like it. I think what you were saying about it being kind of a way to peek into what a world where Pokemon are, like where Pokemon just exist and it's a modern world, and how they interact with
Yeah.
society. I love that part of the movie. I thought that was super,
Yeah.
super well done. And yeah, if the game's like that, that makes me more excited to try it. And I'm also more excited to see what happens with the sequel potentially. I think the one thing I guess I would want more of the sequel is just to have not necessarily a more mature story. I don't need like, Pokemon getting killed
In
off
the
by a serial
world.
killer,
Yeah.
but just have something that's a little bit more I guess I can dig my teeth into more, assuming that the first game wasn't necessarily as story heavy, if that makes sense, or as like intrigue or mystery heavy. I guess that's what I would want from a sequel. Is something similar to like an Ace Attorney or to an extent a Danganronpa, where there's genuinely some kind of mystery that I have to like piece together and whatnot.
You want to like have like an actual like trial scene,
Yeah.
where like Snorlax is yelling out objection.
I mean,
and, like,
honestly, if they wanted to
Gems
turn
as
it,
trials, yes.
yeah, if they wanted to turn it into
Yeah.
a Danganronpa game, I'd be down with that.
yeah, why not? All right. Well, I'm no idea when we're actually going to see anything of this game, but and again, this is all just like a rumor, right? Like someone. I mean, this is a developer who posted on their LinkedIn page, so there's like some credibility to it. But who knows when we're actually going to see it?
We'll see it when Pokemon Sleep is announced again.
There you go. Good answer, Nicholas. Hey, speaking of Pokemon Company, this was kind of a weird story that came through this week. I don't really know what to make of it. Nicholas and I were having a conversation about it, so he might be the better guide. So apparently there's this thing that competitive Pokemon players do called Nuzlocke runs. Is that how you say it, Nicholas?
Yeah, Nuzlocks.
Where it's like, okay. And apparently Nuzlocke was like, he was the person who made this whole thing. Anyways, this story came out from Kit and Krista. They were like the former hosts of Nintendo Minute, and now they're doing their own podcast thing. And they were saying like, oh, like they wanted to do a Nuzlocke run for their show, and then it was shot down because Pokemon Company didn't like to do this. They're saying, oh, we consider this to be on the same level as like hacking your game or whatever. This crazy stuff. But then apparently after this whole story came out, the Pokemon Company came out and they're like, oh no, we don't have a problem with this. So just the whole thing's just weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole mess, and I think it's a mess that was kind of amplified by the fact that it went onto social media, as it always does. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the root of it was Kid and Krista were on a podcast. Someone said, asked a question, hey, do you have any fun stories about Nuzlocks or whatever? And they just mentioned, like you said, for an episode, they suggested doing a Nuzlocke. They, sent the proposal in, and they basically got shut down hard, and there you go. And then people online started taking that and being like, oh, well, Pokemon Company's completely out of touch and don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I feel like I'm more inclined to follow that route of logic, because Pokemon Company makes some genuinely baffling decisions at time, so I could believe that being the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it was a whole mess. Joe Merrick, who is the owner of the Cerebi site, one of the most well-known and reputed sites in terms of just general Pokemon information, stepped in and basically said that from his experience, from his representative that he's been in contact with at the Pokemon Company, this is not the case at all. And I mean, that's kind of the extent of it. And at that point, it's kind of just his word versus their word, and it's just it's a mess, and social media has just made it much more of a mess than it realistically should have been.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing. I don't doubt fun side note. I actually ran into Kit when I was at this Ubisoft preview event.
Oh, nice.
Super nice guy. Mm-hmm. But so I don't doubt, even just from talking with him, I don't doubt that this is something that actually happened. We all know how Nintendo is. They probably have all kinds of weird internal policies or whatever. So it's totally. So I don't think anyone's not people are exaggerating or whatever. It's probably just
it's not malicious.
It's probably
or anything.
Yeah, no, it's probably just way easier for the Pokemon Company to come out and be like, no, of course
we would never do this.
We would never do that. So yeah, so I don't know. It seems like much ado about nothing to me, but it's funny when these random things come up in the news.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first heard that news too, I before we got the clarification of them being cool with it now, anyways. Not to say what Kit and Krista had said wasn't true at the time. But because views and management changes all the time. But
right, exactly.
But it wouldn't shock me. As a matter of fact, I do believe that is something that happened. When they initially asked, and even though they may not feel the same way now, I was just thinking, if these guys just because, like Nicholas said, because it's true, they make some of the most baffling decisions just ever, and they do live in their own bubble, and like it's yeah, I do think that if they weren't developers, they would make a great batch of comedians because they do some of the funniest things that just it just doesn't make sense to me, and you just can't help but laugh at it. And it's just like to relate Nuzlocke to put it on the same scale of ROM hacking that's just absurd. That's just absurd. I don't know. I think that's such an exaggeration that real or fake. It's such a I can't even find the words for it because I'm just so flummoxed from it all. It's
That's a
hard
good
to
word.
process it.
Flummoxed. Yeah, that's good. Um, yeah, and I guess we should probably actually say what Nuzlocke is. Nicholas, would you like to describe?
Sure.
It's just like basically a run where you just
So it's
make it hard on yourself.
Yeah, it's a challenge run. Key note here is that it does not involve any kind of hacking or modding or whatever. It can be done completely native because it's just rules set by the person that you adhere to, yourself. And what it is essentially just you can only catch the first Pokemon of every area. So you have a limited kind of stock of Pokemon that you have access to, and you kind of have to run with what you're dealt based on what you encounter. And the second rule is that if a Pokemon faints in battle, you cannot use it again. I think initially the idea was it dies if it faints, which is, just for flavor. But realistically, what that means is just you cannot use it again. And I think if your entire party faints, then you basically lose and you would have to reset at that point.
Got it. Okay. So there you go. That's what the whole controversy is over.
It's Pokemon's version of a roguelite, basically.
Yeah, it's
pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, Nuzlocks have been a thing for like probably a decade at least. I think they have been around for a very long time. So it's very odd that like this would come out.
It's a controversy now.
It's just weird. Also, that the Pokemon Company just wouldn't be aware of that in any way. Like there have to be people there that would understand what it is, and even if they don't, I would assume that when submitting a video proposal for Nintendo Minute, they would probably Ken and Krista would probably write out the concept of what they're going to be doing. Like I don't think they would just go up to the Pokemon Company and be like, "Yo, can we do a Nuzlocke?" Like they probably write up, hey, this is what it entails and what we will be doing.
It's all very official.
It's weird. It's very bizarre.
Well, so that was, I think that qualifies as our random news story of the week. But let's shift gears here. This is a great topic that Dennis brought up earlier when we were talking about what we wanted to bring up this week. So this is so we've all been living with the Switch for, gosh, it's been, 2017.
Oh God, don't.
So five and a half, almost 6 years now. It'll be 6 years in the spring. Yep. Wow. So we've seen a lot of interesting changes just in the handheld gaming space since then. Just this year alone, we got the Steam Deck, which is a huge deal. We got the Playdate, which is a very different type of handheld console. We've seen a lot of just these types of weird handheld PC, hybrids like the Aya Neo. And then just this past week, Logitech, of all companies, announced they're making their own kind of Android-based gaming console that's mostly focused around streaming. So mostly focused around streaming Xbox cloud games and PlayStation cloud games and all that. So it's kind of an interesting space. We went from only having, at one point it was only Nintendo and Sony. They were really the only companies in the handheld market, and now it's Nintendo and all these other companies.
Yeah, I think it's like when we were sort of briefing before the show. It's one of those things where it's good to have competition, because when you have a monopoly, you get way too comfortable. And with the Switch now almost being 6 years old, it's becoming less and less feasible to get current gen games to run well on the Switch, despite the Switch now more than ever having probably just an insane library, first of all, of games you wouldn't even expect to run on that thing, to varying degree. But it's it's incredible what that system is capable of. However, as more and more games release, and there are more and more games than ever now, because before the Switch was very much like, oh man, I hope that comes to the Switch. I hope that comes to the Switch. Now it's like,
Oh yeah.
now it's like stop porting it to the Switch. It's gotten to that point now where now it's the reverse. Just
I
stop
can't
porting
stand
it
to
to
see
the
it
Switch.
run at like 10 frames per second.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, or it's like, oh wow, this is coming to Switch, but wait, is it actually going to run?
I won't play it on it.
Right.
So.
What's the caveat? Yeah. That's-
Right, and I think and while it was an incredible thing to see in the beginning, and really quite frankly for at least a solid 4 years, these last 2 years I want to say especially, which lines up with when the Series X and the PS5 came out, it's starting to get to a point now where games are becoming less and less optimized for it, and we won't get on the topic of Disney Dreamlight Valley, but it's.
Are you sure?
It's no, I'm positive. but it's this is a good thing. However, in the case of the Logitech cloud handheld, first of all, let me just say I hate it. Doesn't have an official name. That's just the name of it. The Logitech G Cloud handheld is what it's
Not
called.
a bad name. Logitech G Cloud.
Well, G is the series
G
too,
for
right?
gamer, Dennis.
Yeah, I don't know. It's too generalized, man. It's just
G for
it's too
generalized. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, all right. You know what? Touche.
G
touche.
for Gagliardato, Dennis. It has your name.
True.
on it.
True. Touche. But it's interesting, but I think it's also much needed. That we do get this sort of competition to sort of interrupt the market a little bit. Nick, I know you have a Steam Deck, and I've been seeing. I can't speak for everyone. Obviously, I don't have one myself. I wish I did, but I've been seeing more and more comments lately. Now, this could just be a very vocal minority, also. But I'm seeing more and more comments lately that the Steam Deck has sort of, in a way, replaced their Nintendo Switch, and now the Switch has become what Nintendo consoles sort of have become in the past, right? Where it's just like, I just buy this for Nintendo games, right? And that's what people sort of use their Switch now for, that own a Steam Deck anyways. Because they rather play everything else on the Steam Deck, where they know they can get games to run at a comparable, visual fidelity that they would see on your base consoles. So yeah, I don't know if you can confirm or deny that, or how your experience has been with the Steam Deck, or what.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. So I love my Steam Deck, but I love it for different reasons than I love my Switch. So I don't think it's a full-on replacement. Like, it could be, right, depending on what type of games you like to play. And there are some things that it just excels at the Switch will never be able to do, right? Like, you can play pretty much every game ever made on the Steam Deck if you try hard enough, right? You can run emulators, you can install Windows and run games on it. I actually did that. I did this crazy like jerry rigging thing where I got an external hard drive, I installed Windows on it, I velcroed it to the back of my Steam Deck, and that's what I've been using to play Game Pass games on a handheld, right? So you can
That's amazing.
make it as complicated as you want. Yeah, but where the Switch excels is, if you buy a game on it, you don't have to tinker with it, right? You can get this, even if it's not always going to be the best experience, you're going to get, just a console that you can pick up and play. You click on the game, it's going to work. Whereas I think the Steam Deck excels more for people who like to tinker, who want to get the absolute most out of their games, or who really want to take advantage of having this big wide ecosystem open to them.
I mean,
So that's where I think they're different.
Yeah, I mean, the Steam Deck is essentially just a laptop in the shape of a handheld console, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it runs Linux, but yeah, you can install pretty much anything on it if you want to, if you have the patience for it.
Yeah, I've
but
seen
yeah,
it become
like
an emulation machine.
but there are things that the Switch does better. Like for example, you can technically hook up your Steam Deck to a TV, but it's not as seamless of an experience, right? You would have to go into all the settings and change all the display settings, and you'd have to make sure your games can, the Steam Deck doesn't have separate like docked and handheld performance profiles. So you'll have to make sure that, oh, this game might run really well in handheld mode, but then in docked mode, I have to go through and have to change all these settings. Whereas when you just plug the Switch into the TV, it just works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I do think the Switch still kind of does its own thing very well. But yeah, it's really nice, being able to have another way to play some of these bigger games on the go that, they're going to run a lot better. And I have access to this whole back catalog of games now that, some of them are just never going to be available on a proper handheld system. So,
Yeah. I think it's interesting because with all of these handheld consoles that we're getting, feels like none of them have really positioned themselves as a competitor to the Switch, more of an alternative. Like, we haven't gotten a PSP equivalent to the system. Everyone kind of is doing their own thing in a way where they're not going to kind of be stepping on Nintendo's toes, because I think they figure that they probably don't want to do that at this point, with the Switch being such a success. So we have alternatives like the Steam Deck, which is kind of more for hardcore audiences. It has a much higher price point, but also, more performance. It requires a bit more tinkering. Even the Logitech goes in a different direction where it's a cloud-only device. So it's going to be playing stuff at a much higher fidelity, presumably, but it's going to be limited in another factor. And
Right.
it just... I don't know.
no one's trying to create a new ecosystem,
Yeah,
really. Like, no one's trying to create a new PlayStation Store or Nintendo eShop, right?
Yeah.
It's either you're trying to, like, leverage, like, an already existing ecosystem, or, I mean, actually, I guess that's really much it, like, that's kind of what I think you're getting at, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we're necessarily going to see anyone try and directly improve on what the Switch is currently doing, in the way that Sony might have done with some of Nintendo's older handhelds, where they would try to provide like a genuine competitor in the PSP. I don't think that the console, like the manufacturers in the position to do that, Sony and Microsoft, are necessarily want to be doing that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I would love to see Microsoft in particular come out with, like, a dedicated Game Pass handheld. Like, I think they are, like, their ecosystem is just, they're doing great things in making their games available on as many platforms as they feel like they can get them onto. And so I would love to see them attempt something like that. But yeah, it's just, it's just a different time. Like, we're not really at this era where Nintendo does have a lot of direct competition in the handheld space. And so, yeah, we're seeing all these companies trying to be in that space, but not necessarily to compete with Nintendo, which is weird.
Yeah, like,
And
kind
then,
of take the second spot and not try and compete for first, essentially.
Yeah, realizing that, like, there's multiple types of devices out there for multiple types of people. And, like, the Playdate, for example, like, that's just a really just unique concept. Like, for those who aren't familiar, it basically looks like a Game Boy, but this little device, it can play like 20 games basically that you get, like, they like basically send you new games every week. And then if you want, and these are just like very simple, like black and white, 2D games. Some of them are developed by like some like pretty like noteworthy developers. Like I think Toby Fox made a game on there. But it's just kind of a little interesting experiment. It's not meant to replace your Switch. It's not meant to be the PS Vita 2
The
or
Switch
whatever,
killer.
Right. But not everything needs to be, I think is what I'm trying to get at here.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely space for other handheld consoles to exist, and it's good that they do. Although I will perpetually be confused by the existence of handheld consoles that can only play cloud games, because that just doesn't make sense in my head.
Yeah, I feel like the PlayStation Vita was onto something at one point when they had like a cellular model of that. But I think most people aren't exactly rushing out to try and make their cellular plans more expensive either, and I think that's kind of the big barrier.
Clearly what we need is the return of the N-Gage.
Oh, absolutely. absolutely.
What did that have like some cellular?
Oh, that was like a
functionality?
cell phone console. It did not take off.
It was from.
Oh, okay.
It was from Nokia, I think. It was like an old thing. I think it was from Nokia, either Nokia or Motorola, one of them. But it was a very weird concept.
Yeah. Oh, do you guys remember that weird? It was like a just like a Sony phone. Like it was a cell phone first, but instead of the slide out keyboard, it was like PSP controls. Do you guys remember that?
I do remember that.
was
Actually,
weird.
yes, I do.
Yeah. I kind of wish all that had taken off because, like, I one of the things I've started doing recently because I've been curious, like, I want to leverage my xCloud subscription or whatever. Is I bought one of those like phone controllers that you like clip your phone into. But it's just not like as like elegant or as seamless of an experience as just like having a dedicated device.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a Razer Kishi myself. I don't know which one you bought, but I do use that for cloud gaming on occasion. I actually used it last night, actually, to play on the xCloud. So, but yeah, I think my biggest issue with the Logitech G Cloud gaming handheld, terrible name, but with that thing is the fact that it is $300. Actually, the MSRP is $350, but there's a pre-order discount where you can get it for $300. So, but it's cloud only, which is a big issue. You can probably install Android games locally because it does have Google Play on there. But yeah, I mean $300 for a device like that I think is insane. I think at most, I don't know if they're trying to test the market or what's going on to see how much people are willing to pay. But at most that thing should have been $150 for something that's cloud only. But the form factor is fantastic.
Really? You think so?
I love the way it looks. Yeah. For something that's cloud only. Yeah, but however, I will say the battery life, I don't know how much you guys know about it, but like the battery life, it's got a 12-hour battery life.
Ooh, wow.
It's huge.
I guess that makes sense. If it's cloud
Well,
only.
I mean, if you're just like cloud streaming, but I mean, I don't know. I think it's actually not that bad of a deal. I mean, it's just, I mean, sure, like compared to the Switch, like maybe the value proposition is a bit of a harder sell, but if you think about it, you're getting just a smartphone without the phone capabilities. I mean, with nice controls around it. It's $300 for basically a dedicated gaming smartphone, I guess.
I mean, a smartphone that you need, because it doesn't have service, as I understand. So a smartphone that you need to be connected to Wi-Fi to be able to play stuff on, though, which is a bit of a hard sell.
Yeah, that's the weird caveat for sure. But yeah, I do wish we were. I will say the other thing that's not going to have me replacing my Switch anytime soon is I love the OLED screen on the OLED Switch like so much. Like it's a great screen. It makes just all the games look so much better, and you just don't see a lot of them. And so I think until we get a Steam Deck with an OLED screen, I don't think my Switch is going anywhere.
I'm still waiting on that Tears of the Kingdom Special Edition OLED before I dip my toes in.
Oh yeah,
it'll happen. It'll more than likely.
Eventually.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to us talk about just the handheld gaming space. I want to give some quick updates on some games that came out this week, because I'd say it was a bit of a quieter week. There are some things I want to mention. So probably the biggest release of the week was the Diofield Chronicle, which was, believe it or not, an RPG from Square Enix. Did you guys know that they're making RPGs still?
Oh no, I thought they specialized in visual novels. What are they doing with an RPG?
Yeah, it's been a while since they put out a Switch exclusive RPG.
Yeah, they just don't do those anymore, really.
They
really just don't. But yeah, I feel like this one just kind of came out, like just kind of like out. I don't want to say out of left field, but it kind of slipped under the radar a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's getting good reviews. This is Nicholas, you called it was part of the Underline series. Square Enix underlines all their RPGs.
Yeah, I think Dennis had been mentioning about it, but yeah, all of the a lot of the Team Asano games, the Bravely games and Octopath and whatnot. I think Various Day Life as well.
Various Day Life as well.
Yes, Various Day Life. But yeah, so this one is it's more of a real-time strategy game. And I haven't heard too much about it, but I've heard that overall it's got a pretty interesting story, and that it's it's a good RTS game.
Which coincidentally is also what kills it for me, because I just don't like RTS games.
And that's what killed it for me. Yeah. And I actually mentioned in the chat a couple days ago, where I didn't know who had played the demo and who didn't, but I could not click with it. It was not for me, which is a shame because like Square Enix, I always get excited for every Square Enix game because not only do I enjoy their games for the most part, but they have some of the most incredible illustrations in the industry. Period.
Oh yeah.
So like whenever I see good art, and that's what like attracts me to like certain visual novels as well, is like if you have a fantastic art style, I'm in right away. I don't even need to know the plot, or how the game is. I'm already in because of the art style. Now, that can be, a hit or miss depending on what game it is, but because I've fallen into some very poor games, unfortunately, that have incredible art styles. But yeah, this is one of those games where DFO Chronicle. I thought it looked fantastic from a visual perspective. But then once I started playing it, I was like, oof, no, I can't do this because like Nicolas said, it's an RTS. I can't get into that. And I've tried many times. The closest I got to was with StarCraft. Put a couple, like 10, 20 hours into that. But after a point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I can't just sit here and watch these people just automatically do things. I just can't. I get bored.
Do you think that has to do with the fact that just like RTS games on consoles aren't always a natural fit? Like, was it the controls for you? Is it just the pacing of
that too? That too, because I tried it on 3 separate platforms. I tried it on Switch, then I tried it on Xbox, and then I tried it on PC because I was hoping I could click with it somewhere. And I also just like to see the performance differences in all of them. And it definitely fit. It was definitely the most ergonomic with keyboard and mouse for sure. But it still didn't change the fact that I just, unfortunately, I couldn't click with it. So after a little bit, I was just like, no, I'm done. I'm skipping this one.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's a competitive genre right now. Like it almost feels like Square Enix is competing against themselves at this point. They're putting out so many RPGs.
Yeah,
essentially. But yeah, it's definitely one that I'm curious about. Not going to play it anytime soon, but I am curious about it, and the reviews that I saw for it have me interested in it. So, but yeah, Diofield Chronicles out. We also got a new Shovel Knight game, Shovel Knight Dig. This is a kind of Shovel Knight roguelite that I think is probably best compared to Downwell. Did you guys ever play Downwell? Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's one of
I got it on Vita forever ago.
Hell
I never
yeah.
actually sat down and played it.
There's your reason to own
man,
Vita.
that was well, pretty much. But yeah, so Downwell is probably one of the few like roguelites that I actually really enjoyed, and Shovel Knight Dig seems to be kind of taking some like similar ideas from that in terms of its gameplay, but just looks absolutely charming. The game is developed by NERefreshPodcast, which I just have such fond memories of playing their games back on in the browser gaming days, But they've been on kind of a roll lately, putting out some smaller games of their own, and the game looks stunning and it's getting really good reviews. It's pretty much in line with the action platforming of the original Shovel Knight games, but it's also a prequel, apparently. So that's interesting.
I like basically every single Shovel Knight game they put out has been either a prequel or like a midquel, I think is what you would call it, where it just happens concurrently. They haven't really delved into anything that happens after the main game story.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. It's interesting. But yeah, this one looks fun. Again, I'm not a big roguelike guy, but the fact that this one has caught my interest despite that, I think is telling. It just looks like a very high quality experience.
Yep. I mean, Shovel Knight's great. It's a roguelike, and I generally enjoy roguelikes, at least for a good dozen or so hours. So I'll probably pick this up at some point. I haven't yet because I'm still busy with some other things, including Splatoon 3, but
right.
Definitely think this will be fun to pick up.
And then I'd say the last kind of notable release of the week, I mean, I'm sure there were more, but this is one of the bigger ones. Taiko no Tatsuhin Rhythm Festival. We've gotten quite a few of these games. So these are a very popular series in Japan, at least, of rhythm games where you're actually like beating notes on the taiko drum. And if you play it in the arcades, which I actually did have the opportunity to do once, it's really fun. You like have these like you're actually beating on a taiko drum. It's ridiculous. But you can buy a little accessory for the Switch. It's like a mini taiko drum, and you can like beat these little mini drumsticks on it. It's super cute.
Do they sell those in the U.S. or are they Japan only?
I mean, you can get them on Amazon, but I think they have to import them.
Yeah, as far as I know, I've only seen them, well, like you said, on Amazon. But like when I thought about getting one, because I was like super into, I was super into those games for a little bit. I almost imported mine from PlayAsia. They sell it there too.
Yeah. But I feel like this is a notable one because so we didn't get these games in the U.S. for such a long time, and then the Switch was like. When the Switch came out, they got, a Taiko game, and it was kind of like, felt like a big reintroduction of the franchise to the West. And now it feels like we're getting a new Taiko game on the Switch like pretty much every year at this point, which is crazy. And I think this one even has some like Nintendo like characters and songs in it from what I've heard.
Yeah, I think it has a Zelda track at least. I remember seeing that, but yeah. Seems like a fun little rhythm game.
So overall, a little bit of a quiet week, but definitely some interesting releases here and there, and things are going to start picking up pretty quick once October rolls around. Is what we got Bayonetta 3 coming up soon. We've got Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. We've got, gosh, I feel like there's more coming out.
There's ports for Nier and Persona 5.
Right. Lots of big ports coming. So October's
Overwatch
going to be a busy month for sure. Overwatch 2. Dennis is particularly excited about that one.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, let's switch over to our last segment this week. What have we all been playing? Nicholas, let's start with you. What have you been playing?
Nothing super big, to be honest. It's mostly been playing a little bit of Splatoon 3 here and there. Spending time with the Splatfest that's been happening this weekend. And it's
how's that been going?
So, it's been fun, honestly. It has been fun. I was playing with a friend yesterday and having a good time. Today's been a little odd because, the whole tricolor turf war mechanic that they've introduced in this game? There's been a whole mess with that where because it was kind of unbalanced in the demo Splatfest that they had before the game launched, they've reduced the frequency of it for this one, and now it's basically not shown up for anyone. You get them every 10, 20, 50 games depending on the team you're on. It's just a little disappointing, but I think overall it's it's a fun experience. I've been delving into the game a little bit deeper, raising the ranks, trying out different weapons, and I really do enjoy the game. So yeah, it's just having a good time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's kind of the main thing you've been jumping into over the weekend?
Yep.
Yeah, those live events are cool, man. I'm not a big multiplayer gamer, but I've always liked seeing the community that's popped up around this.
Honestly,
Splatfest
I'm not either. I think Splatoon is the only competitive multiplayer game I've ever really played, but they just handle things very well in terms of the community. Just in terms of having still relatively competent single players that you can enjoy even regardless of the multiplayer, and also just having a friend to play with kind of just changes everything. Just having someone to kind of share the experience with, definitely it changes the vibe of how you're playing. It makes things feel a little less frustrating, less competitive. So yeah,
very cool. Dennis, what about you? What have you been playing this week? Have you been doing the Splatfest too?
Yeah, I actually did try it out. But I haven't gotten any of those tricolor wars though. I don't know what's been going on with that. I mean, you mentioned it, Nicholas, but I was wondering what was going on.
Weird,
I was like, why? I thought this was supposed to be the defining new thing, and it's just and then it's just not there.
Skin needs some balancing.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been playing a little bit of that, and it's fine. I enjoyed it. Also, it's more Splatoon. But it's fun though. They definitely refined it in all the areas that matter the most, and it's definitely I think the best one so far for sure. But other than that, it's been a pretty quiet week. Really, I've been playing Corpse Factory. That's the main one I've been playing, which is this visual novel. And that's very dark. It's like a psychological thriller visual novel. Honestly, it's not too far off to say it sort of reminds me of a mix of like, let's just say, oh God, what was that one game called? Like the House of Fata Morgana, and
Yeah.
it's like a mix of that and like Corpse Party a little bit, and it's really really interesting. It's got a fantastic visual direction, like we were talking about earlier. I had that visual art style that was striking to me right away, so immediately I was drawn to it, and yeah, I've been playing a little bit of that. It's this really cool story of this website called Corpse Girl, and basically anyone can submit a photo of someone that they essentially want to, well, they don't want them to walk around anymore, and so
Well,
they'll
that's not very
submit.
nice.
They
Well,
want to
yeah,
gift them a
but
bike. How kind.
yeah, that's all it is. Yeah, just a bike, maybe some ice cream.
Yeah.
But yeah, they submit a photo with some information, and then the corpse girl basically, you know, essentially people that are
Unalives
submitted to this,
them.
yeah, pretty much, yeah. The people that are submitted to this website essentially mysteriously, pass away within like 24 to 48 hours, basically, through various means, though, right?
It's a
Sometimes
fast
it's
turnaround time.
through. Yeah. It's this really crazy, mysterious thing. Sometimes it's through, self-inflicted purposes. Sometimes it's through accidental purposes. Sometimes it's through, a third party. But it's really really crazy, and it's got full voice acting. The
Ooh.
voice acting is fantastic, and yeah, it's just really like I'm really impressed with this so far. It's honestly one of the best visual novels I've played in a very long time, and I play a lot of visual novels like on a yearly basis. So yeah, I'm having such a great time with it, man.
Ooh.
Again, the art style is fantastic.
Is it so? Just to clarify, because you mentioned the Corpse Party series of games, but this is not part of that. It's a separate thing. Just with a
No, yeah,
similar
yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah. Don't let the corpse part of the corpse factory like kind of confuse you. Yeah, no, because I got excited
Okay.
too, right?
Okay.
Because Corpse Party is one of my favorite series like ever, and so when I saw a Corpse Factory, I was like, oh, is this a new is this a new one? I very much like stood up from my chair. I was like, I almost had my own Nintendo Direct, right, where I just kind of jumped up like, what is this? Like
Oh dear.
I just sort of freaked out, yeah. But no, it's its own original concept. It's an original game from a completely unrelated studio called River Crow Studio.
Got it. Got
But
it.
yeah, it's great so far. I've put a couple hours into it. It's really fantastic. The writing's really well done. The voice acting again is fantastic, and the illustrations are like, oh my god, it's just it's and playing on a Nintendo Switch OLED is man, those images pop. Man, those illustrations really come out, and it's a sight to behold for sure.
Yeah, the Switch is just amazing for visual novels like that.
Oh,
It's
absolutely,
just,
absolutely.
just, yeah. I think actually going back to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, there's a lot more visual novels available on Steam, I would say, than on the Switch for sure. But the Switch is just such a lightweight device. But it's a really good fit for
Yeah.
those kinds of experiences. No, that's great. I'll have to put that one on my radar for sure. This has been a quieter week for me. I had a small surgery this week that has just when I was like scheduling it, I was like, oh, I'll probably have some time to crank out some video games, but I've just been feeling like crap, and it just has not been great for that. So I haven't been playing too much, but I did end up playing a little bit of this weird indie game called the Procession to Calvary. I don't know if you guys have seen this game at all. It's
I'm gonna look it
super.
up.
Okay, so this whole game takes place inside like Renaissance era paintings. Okay,
Ooh.
but each Renaissance era painting has been animated, and it's all very Monty Python style. So you're playing as like Joan of Arc, like right as the crusade is ending, and it kind of plays out like a point and click adventure. She's like all annoyed that she has to stop killing people because the crusades are over, but she ends up going on like this quest to like go kill gosh, what I can't even remember his name. It's like I'm just gonna insert like a random like royal name, like King George the 50th or whatever. She has to like go and find him and like kill him. But as she like is traversing through all these Renaissance era paintings, she'll like run into like historical figures. Like you run into Jesus while he's like performing a miracle. Like, it's just completely ridiculous.
This sounds delightful.
And so like for example, like one of the side quests I had to do, I like ran into Jesus. He was like doing like a magic trick basically, and he was like, "Yo, can you go get me some berries?" And you're like, "What do you need the berries for?" He's like, "Oh, I need them for my next trick." And you're like, "Oh shit, he's gonna do the thing where he like turns the water into wine or whatever." Yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's really fun. And it's on the Switch, so if you're interested, I would highly recommend it.
You know what this kind of reminds me of, actually, now that I'm looking at it. It definitely looks goofy, and I do have to say, unfortunately, it's I can tell it's not for me. But it does remind me of, I don't know if you guys have ever played Rock of Ages, but Rock of Ages is like this really quirky game. You just throw down a rock, really, that just tumbles down like a hill, that in these actually are really well-designed levels. But you do go through like various parts of history. and the art style is sort of, well, not the gameplay. The gameplay's fully three-dimensional, but there's like cutscenes in between. The art style is sort of similar to that, in which they look like, sort of like, I mean, I guess you could, I mean, would you say paper cutouts or something? I don't know how to refer to that art style, but
yeah, I'd say
yeah.
that's a good way to put it. Like bringing a painting to life, basically.
Yeah. And yeah, it's very humorous, very comedic, but when I looked at that, it just immediately reminded me of Rock of Ages, which is just a very, very goofy game.
Yeah, it's really funny. It may not be for everyone, but if you give it a try, I think you'll at least get a couple good laughs out of it for sure. All right. Well, I think that just about wraps up our show for the week. So thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in. This has been episode 26 of Nintendo Everything Refresh. If you like the show, please spread the word. Keep on listening. We are on every streaming platform pretty much at this point. And we appreciate everyone's continued support. So thank you so much. And we'll be back at you next week with everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo.